Exactly, exactly. But the Taiwanese have considerable reserves, but they aren't, let's say, as hardcore and dedicated a civilian population as Israel is, which is also surrounded by enemies. Um, but it is not a negligible land force. Probably the Navy and their competent Air Force will be eventually swept aside fairly quickly by the Chinese. But Taiwanese land forces are considerable, and the reserve system can be mobilized fairly quickly. They just recently had a drill, which they emphasized that. And if the resistance holds and the morale doesn't crack, which is saying a lot given the pressure that's going to be put on them, stockpiles can't last that long. Maybe a month if they can be even distributed.
Hmm.
But yes, the danger of intervention is what the Chinese would fear most, and the second thing they fear most is being stalled and stuck on the spikes of the porcupine, just not being able to finish it quickly. And the casualties will be tremendous. This is not anything to be looked at lightly.
Right. Like if the Taiwanese decide to resist, right, if they're offended by this blockading and by this attacking and shooting at them, and it swings public opinion um, more strongly against the mainland than it currently is, but it's possible it could, right? Because in Ukraine before the Russian invasion, right, in the lead up to the invasion, and even in the before the Russia seized Crimea in 2014, the Ukrainian opinion was kind of 50% divided, 50-50, with a pro-Russian part of the population in eastern Ukraine and a pro-Western, anti-Russian part of the population in Western Ukraine. But after the Russia seized Crimea and a couple of those smaller areas in the east, it really hardened public opinion, even in eastern Ukraine, against Russia. And now the Ukrainian public opinion is like 95% hostile to Russia. So you can see if there's a hard blockade and then like a botched attempt at an invasion that doesn't work out for the Chinese, it could swing Taiwanese opinion in a similar way strongly against the mainland and harden resistance the way Russia's actions did in Ukraine in the 2010s.
Exactly. And more recently, the American bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities actually raised support for the government, which was floundering in terms of public support in Iran. The more violence applied to these societies, they sometimes respond with anger and resistance. That's much more than expected.
Right, that's true, and that's probably why the war against Iran by Israel and the U.S. was only 12 days, right? They kept it really short so as not to
Right.
increase that popular resistance and popular sentiment against the U.S. and Israel. They wanted to just take out these few facilities and try to keep the public hostile to the regime as much as possible.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, it,
Okay, well,
it's
Richard,
yeah, I was just
this has been a fascinating conversation. We're so glad to have you here on Gray Mantle Television, our new YouTube channel, as our first interviewee, frequent contributor, and expert on naval strategy, Richard Jupa. We've loved your articles, and we're really looking forward to your sixth article in the series, and maybe seventh eventually, later this month or early September. On, could you give us a very quick preview, since we just have a couple of minutes left, on what your next article is going to be about?
for sure, Mike. Um, Obviously, up till now, the premise has been that Taiwan is fighting alone for the first few weeks and doesn't get the assistance. No other ally independently would act other than diplomatically without the United States leadership. And as I said, this is tenuous, but at the same time, it can't be totally discounted. And if the United States puts its powerful naval hand uh, onto the scale, China knows, Beijing knows that, oh, the stakes are really raised now, and whether it's able to um, continually resist and pull off the invasion while the United States pressures it is a real question mark, I'm sure, and even Xi's destiny-fueled mind. But it examines the options uh, for the United States and for China if the United States decides to go in within a week, 2 weeks, maybe three at the most. That would make a huge difference in terms of the invasion's success and the blockade success.
Hmm.
Not that it would be easy for either opponent in this case.
Right.
Neither for the US nor China, right? Like
Right.
they'd be both hugely pressured, each facing enormous strategic and tactical challenges and huge like reputational risk and risk of major political shocks domestically. Regardless, even if they win or lose, particularly if they lose if they're on the losing end of such a military confrontation, right?
Well, true. It's one little detail that comes out. There seems to be in war games, which will be discussed, because this has been war gamed a lot about the possibility of a clash between China and the United States. The surface vessels are tremendous casualties on both sides, and that is in the long run maybe better for China because they, as you know, is the world's capital in shipbuilding. They can build ships about 200 times faster than America can right now.
Right. So that's an important point to talk about. So, Richard, before we say goodbye for the day, do you have a title in mind for your next article? No.
But I'd like it to be snappy. It's just actually, I might save that for last because it would be such a tragedy that I don't feel snappy
Yeah.
about titling it.
None of us feel snappy about the possibility of a China-US naval war in the South China Sea, full-scale
Naval,
naval
air,
Conflict.
cyber,
Yeah.
satellite, everything would be in the mix, and the
You th
economies would suffer. Oil economies, but China and the United States. Then there's always the threat of a miscalculation and the nuclear threshold being crossed. So
yeah.
Yeah,
There we
it's a
go.
bad situation. We don't feel snappy about it, but we're gonna have to come up with a snappy title because we're running a blog dedicated to geopolitics here. We want readers, right? So we gotta have snappy titles.
all right, put our minds to it.
Okay, Richard, thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate your time and hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on Gray Mantle.
Okay, likewise, likewise. Okay, take care, Rich.